It's the Central Weekly, a weekly podcast from the Central Podcast Network. You've got Mr. John Henninger
And
Jared LaCrone.
And say it.
We can't tell him yet. No, he's in the studio. That's right. Creative arts pastor Eric the Lyday is in the studio.
There he is.
Eric, say hi.
It's the first time I've ever had that as a nickname.
Eric the Lyday.
Eric the Lyday. That's a new one.
Hey, if you want to change it, you can. Here's the cool thing about episode number 51 of the Central Weekly. We're in a short series here at Central called The Songs We Sing.
Yes.
John, what's it about?
The songs we sing.
Okay, that's good. And here's the thing. The reason why we have Eric in the studio is why?
Well, I mean, obviously, the songs that we sing every weekend at Central, I mean, it goes far beyond just the songs that we sing, but the songs are a big part of the praise that we bring. And the man charged with leading us in praise, our worship leader here at Central for all genres of music in every service, the man is Eric Lyday. And so as our creative arts pastor, part of his responsibilities is determining what is it that we're going to sing from a week-to-week basis and why.
So now over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be joined by Eric sitting in the studio because Eric really doesn't have much to do. So we're looking for things to help him fill his time. No, he's got a lot to do. Here's the cool thing about at Central. The next 2 weeks, we're looking at the songs we sing. Eric is joined by John in with the worship team to do this together. And it's really, if you hadn't had a chance to listen to this sermon particularly, go on our YouTube page or centralnow.com to listen to the full, because then you'll have the complete picture of what we're going to talk about. But since Eric's here, and Eric's been on the Central Weekly, and he is a master of the podcast world because his own praise podcast with him and Brooke has a huge following. They do a great job bringing in people, talking about it. Go ahead, John.
It's really the flagship program of the Central Podcast Network. Yeah, I mean, you can say what you want. The praise podcast is really the flagship.
Currently the Kansas City Chiefs.
It's the ratings leader.
It is the ratings leader. I don't know about flagship. Do you get flagship if you're the ratings leader? Usually.
I don't know. What drives that?
But here's the cool thing, and that's why we're going to, and while you're here, Eric, and because we're talking about worship, I want to talk to our worship pastor. So we're going to share a little bit more of your story. So you're the guest, if you didn't know, for this episode. But Eric does, I want to say this right at the top, Eric does tell his complete story from birth to current on the Praise Podcast. There's an episode that is his story. They have guests that come on, they tell their story, and Eric did that with Brooke a little while ago. John's smiling.
It's like a 35-year podcast. I mean, it's really, really long.
Yeah, podcast. I was giving these guys a hard time because, I mean, I give them a hard time all the time because, I mean, in the podcast world, you know, I mean, their podcast length, their game needs, I believe actually Josh Robinson quoted that, you know, you guys' podcast game needs work, but, you know, as far as the length, our last episode was 2 hours.
Yeah. You got to check that one out, Lise. We're going to talk about her later on in the podcast, this podcast.
Yeah. But you guys do a great job. Thanks. I think I'm supposed to say as a guest, thanks for allowing me to be here. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. Can't wait.
I feel like you're patting me on the head and I'm a little boy.
After punching you in the face.
Yes, exactly. But here's what we're going to look at. Week 1, choose to praise. And then we're going to ask Eric the question at the end of the episode, what we ask all of our guests, how has God been working in his life lately? And oh man, I'm excited about that one because it's been a crazy week for you, Eric, hasn't it?
It has been. But every
Crazy
week is
good.
kind of, it's been a good week. It's busy, but busy is good. And so, yeah, we're plugging right along, as we say.
Literally.
Because you're plugging in lights.
Wow.
Yeah, that's been our motto on the stage, has been just plugging right along.
If you're not familiar again with the Central family, we've got a new set design via Eric, Aaron, and his creative arts team. Kind of more of a low key than what we're used to at Central.
From arches, handmade arches to this would be considered far less labor intensive than what we came from, but still impactful and creative, and I'm excited about it.
Okay, so let's talk about the songs we sing. Week number 1, choose to praise, and great worship set. And then we went right into John gave us a little introduction, but then Eric, you took first swing, and gosh, really great job. And really, you started things off with that Ephesians chapter 4. and you went in from there. And our response to his presence is our worship. And again, we need to preference this. Worship is not just an event that we go to. Worship is a way of life. And I think that's a good thing. And that's what I think maybe even going to talk about a little bit more next week in your lesson, and talk more about how it's not just what we do, it's who we are.
Next week, we're talking more about like giving to praise. Like our praise costs us something, whether it's our comfort or otherwise.
Good. Completely the opposite of what
But basically what you said.
But through that Ephesians verse, you've got the equip, build up, and unify. That's what worship should be doing in our lives.
Yeah, I think, especially in, whether you've been around church for a long time or not, I mean, like the role of the worship pastor, worship leader is, like a pretty prevalent role in, probably any church that you go to in some form or fashion. And so I think it's interesting when you look at in that Ephesians section of scripture, and obviously pastor is listed, but like the idea of a song leader or worship leader specifically, is not listed in that. And at first it's kind of like a job security, like, oh dang, should I even, but I think when you look at what follows that role, that to build, to equip, that really is the job. I think we look at some of these big churches that are doing big things and, doing a lot of things in worship, which is great. It's easy to think that that's the mark that we're all shooting for. Yeah. And that's what it should be, or that's what the goal is. But really, it's just, that's not what we've been tasked with. I mean, yes, singing and leading songs is certainly part of the job, but it's not the job. Yeah. And so, that's a big part of it to me, as far as, when we're structuring services, whether it's Jon or or whoever, we want people to leave that service feeling built up and better equipped to go and live this daily lifestyle of worship that is required.
Is it pretty similar how you and Jon select songs? Because I can imagine yours, Eric, is a little different than Jon's. Jon, I think back in the day when you selected songs as our worship leader, you just kind of went to the CCM charts, went to the top 5 songs, and that was our weekend service.
Sorry, my headphones are cutting out. What'd you say?
I said you did a great job selecting songs.
Oh, thanks, man.
But really, here's the point. And you went right into it. We need to know about the songs that we're singing. They are not just something we come in and we blindly, not blind, hopefully, but anyways, we're not blindly singing. These words have power in them. And when we come into the table to worship, they can't just be something that we just sing blindly. I guess I'm saying the word blindly too much, but Amazing Grace.
Yeah.
And I think we started off the service talking about that, and that led into Eric. But I just think it's really important for people to understand that a weekend service is not just like a grab bag of elements. I mean, we're not just, hey, let's talk about this and like just whatever songs or whatever. I mean, like, Lord willing, every element from beginning to end, concept to completion, is spirit driven. It's the common thread throughout all of these elements that are diverse otherwise. I mean, singing is different than speaking, but and the other stuff. But when we are working together, but also reliant on the Holy Spirit throughout it, it just brings a continuity to all of it. I think that brings a better worship experience for all of us for the day.
And then Eric, you talked about your Newton story. Newtown, thank you. And because Newton's in Illinois.
And a fig. I love Fig Newton.
It's true. But your Newtown story, and that was really a good example for us to know, for you, about how words do shape how you're worshiping. Yeah,
there's a lot of elements that just go into that, and I think for as Jon mentioned, it's important that people understand how intentional like everything we do really is. Yeah. And I mean, Jon and I, we meet weekly to be able to talk through you know, what's on his heart, because it does me no good to pick songs that aren't going to, you know, support and unify the message that he's in, as just as it does him no good to come out of a worship time that really has had nothing, you know, not driving towards what he's got to bring. And so, I mean, we talk about that. We take that seriously. I mean, obviously Jon and I have been friends for a long time, and we've led worship together in many different aspects for a lot of years. But I mean, like that, we take that relationship of that seriously as well, just because, I mean, there really is, I mean, if he's driving a different direction than I'm driving, then it's not going to create a unified, cohesive message for, you know, and it's like the Holy Spirit has one goal, and it's not about our goals. And so it's like, if we're not unifying that message between us, but, and yeah, so I mean, obviously, when we led worship together, most times, you know, I was playing drums and Jon was singing. So, I mean, I got a lot of firsthand looks as to just the behind the scenes of what went through Jon's mind and what, you know, that process was and what that looked like. And as we were getting ready for this sermon, I told him, I said, you know, one story or one scenario of that playing out that will always, I mean, regardless that the Newtown deal will always stick in my mind. But, we were at, I don't even know what, I don't know if Airbnb was even a thing.
Right.
But,
I was trying to remember. I don't even remember what
we
you
were
saying,
in this
to be
house.
honestly.
We were in a house.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it was just like somebody, but I mean,
How did you get the invite?
Okay, so this was when That the World May Know.
Okay.
World May Woe. Because so this is like what? When did Newtown happen? Like 2012?
Yeah, I think so.
Ish, which is when that album would have been a thing. And so it was right in that same neck of the woods when this whole thing went down there. And Sarah, my wife, has her old college roommate. Lives in Newtown. And her dad is a pastor of a church there. And so, of course, you know, as clergy, they're connected to the community and that whole thing. And so, I mean, you don't know what to do in a situation like that. And so we actually sent them a box of There Is Hope CDs.
Oh.
That's a compact disc. And we sent them a box of CDs and just said, do whatever with these. Do nothing with them. Do something with them. Give them to people. Obviously, you're in a community that is in desperate need of hope right now. And so they did that, and then just one thing led to another, and they held this 26-hour prayer vigil, and at the end of that was a worship service that we had the privilege of leading.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sitting in a house.
Yeah, so we went to the prayer, you know, of course it was going on for 26 hours.
Yeah, so you were there.
We were there for a good stretch. And, you know, I think coming out of that, you got kind of that firsthand of, you know, like seeing how hurt, not just families, but even just the community. I think, Newtown is not a big place. I would even venture to say it might be smaller than Mount Vernon. It did not seem like a big community, but you could just see how it just rattled and shook, you know, the community as a whole, as it, you know, would.
Everything about it.
As as it should. And so I think coming out of spending time there, you know, and I remember we got back and, you know, we were starting to talk through just what this worship was going to look like at the end. 'Cause again, you know, it's just, you're always trying to figure out in a worship set. I think, you know, you want to take people on a journey in a way, you know? And so you're just trying to feel like, obviously this is a pretty somber deal, but like we don't, you know, music can impact atmospheres and it can change it. So, you know, we don't want to just be completely somber here, you know, just trying to figure out how to weave some hope in, some joy in, but then also it be appropriate for the moment and appropriate for the setting. And Jon had said, you know, I really think we should do it as well, but I'm really struggling with just the idea of like, is it right to even make these people say those words? Because it was anything but well for them at the moment, you know? And so, you know, we kind of talked back and forth for a while of just, you know, like, should we do that? Is that okay? You know, I mean, we want them to be able to sing these words and mean them, but like, is that almost wrong of us to do that? And we ended up doing it. We ended up kind of that we should, and we did. And as I said in the sermon, I mean, just thinking back on that, I'm glad we did, because, you know, I think there was probably very few people there that would have actually said, I do agree, like it is well, but I know that there's no doubt that them saying those words, even if they didn't totally mean them at the moment, it opened up a door. It opened up, maybe for some of them to have some really angry prayers with God, and for them to just mourn and to, that it may not be well now, but because God is a God of hope, that it can be well later on. But and
I remember having that conversation, because correct me if I'm wrong, but It Is Well was written by Horatio Spafford, right? And so that the whole backstory to even the song It Is Well was born out of loss within a family.
Tons of tragedy,
exactly, tragedy within a family. And so in a way, kind of a sad way, just an appropriate song, an appropriate sentiment to be singing in that kind of setting, knowing even where the song came from in the first place.
Yeah. One of my favorite points that you made, Eric, came out of that, after that story, and you just said it opens up a dialogue with God. Worship can do that. And it's almost like sometimes you get a clog, and you've got to release that clog in order for those feelings and those emotions and that dialogue to continue. And worship songs can do that. Can unleash a lot of things that if we don't set that quiet time or that joyful time purposely, then everything's just going to clog up. There's going to be no dialogue. There's going to be no connection whatsoever.
Yeah, there was a quote that I didn't use in the sermon, but I liked. It's from Hans Christian Andersen.
Classic.
He, everybody's favorite. But he said, "Music speaks where words cannot."
Yeah.
And I think for me, I mean, music's obviously a big part of my life, but I think for everybody, I mean, whether you play an instrument or not, like, everybody can connect to music in some way. Yeah. And so I think sometimes we miss those, I think that's why it's so important to understand what we sing and to know and to understand the moments that you're in, because I think we don't think about that. Hey, I just had a really hard week. And honestly, I'm angry. I'm mad at God, or I'm just really depressed, or I'm just really down, or I don't know how to talk to my spouse about this, or I don't know how to talk to God about this, but we can sing a song, and through those words of that song, they can almost be the prayer that we need to pray, and can start to give words to the thoughts and feelings that we don't know how to express on our own, maybe right off the bat. Yeah. And I think that's why, I think that's the biggest. I hope that as we do this 2-week series, and I hope that the thing that people take away most is, like, we're not just singing because somewhere somebody said, hey, in a church service, you should sing some songs as well. Like it's just not, it's so much bigger than that. And if I think we as a people can really start to grasp that, then it will quite literally change atmosphere and lives.
Yeah, I think God knew what he was doing when he put the intention on worship in a service and teaching in a service. There's something that speaks to the heart, the mind, and the soul during a worship service that you can't replicate that in too many other atmospheres. And I think that correlates too with worship done in community is a completely different thing. So speaking to worship together like a family, when we choose to praise in community, we share, all that.
Yeah, I think we, whether it was COVID or even before then, we just don't, I think, understand how much, even if you're an introvert, like, you need people. Now, I am an extrovert, and I am like, people give me life. So like being around people is a life-giving thing for me in general. But I mean, there is just, you can't replace the opportunity to worship with other people. And the best part, like, they don't even need to be your friends, because if you're all worshiping God, then that's like all the unifying element you need there, you know? And I think I think sometimes we get so caught up coming to like a church service. It's all about me. What can I take away from this service? You know, like what can you teach me? How can you entertain me? How can you do this or this, you know, for me? And I think, you know, if we look back at a lot of examples of gathering, I think one of the biggest parts of that was a moment that the church got to come together and support each other and lift each other up. And, you know, like you're learning throughout the week and you're learning things, you know, but like that was a moment to gather and to encourage the people around you and to encourage others in worship and to pray for each other and to celebrate with each other. And so I think that is, I hope we don't miss the importance of, you know, like all the time, if there's somebody like just bawling right next to you, I can promise it's not from my vocal ability that they might be crying the other way, but it's like you know what I mean? Like it's because there's something going on. There's something that they want to, you know what I mean? So like, that's an opportunity right there, you know? I mean, if somebody's sitting next to you and they go down to pray, you know, like that's an opportunity to worship in community. And so I don't know, I just think it's very, to know what the person on your left and right is going through, and to then it changes how you worship as well, because to know that, holy smokes, that person just lost their mom, and you know, they're not only are they struggling, but they're still singing these words and they're still lifting their hands, or they're still here, they still even showed up, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's neat that this episode's coming out on February 19th, and it's the same night as our Connection Night. And at Connection Night, we have it planned for Brenda. She's from the Carbondale area, to come and share her testimony about how God has worked through Central to impact her life. And when I got on the phone with her, I asked her, "Hey, could you share that story?" She just automatically went, "Oh, I have to," because she said, "You don't understand how important this church family has been to me." And she is not somebody that's here every week, but she has found community through online. And really, Jennifer pouring into her and finding elements. If you can't physically be in the building, again, we're talking a lot about physically being in the building and what that brings. But if you can't, there are still so many elements that through the online, through prayer, through reaching out and saying hi online, and knowing that people are there caring for you and caring about you during that worship service. And Brenda says, what I can experience online, sitting in my kitchen table, is really impactful, but gosh, I'd love to be there in service. And it's just really neat, because there's somebody that struggles with, she wishes she can be there all the time because she knows how important community is and being in there, but she is still finding a little slice of that community online. But
well, I think even to Brenda's, because Brenda is one of Brooke and I's favorites, and we get pretty well weekly, if not bi-weekly, emails from Brenda. But I think that's a big part of that, is Brenda recognizes that, and Brenda takes the steps to do something about it. Exactly. Like, she can't be here, but Brenda sends Brooke and I an email after every praise podcast we do. And that gives her an opportunity to open up, like, you know, it's a two-way street kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, you can find community, and we now have a connection with Brenda that we would not have had she not ever sent an email in, you know, in the first place. And so I think that if you're listening to this, I mean, like, you know, when people say, put your name in the chat, or people say, send in a prayer request, or Jen or Jared, or, I mean, like, it matters. Like, it matters. And your life can be different because of taking that step, making that choice.
Yeah, it's really true. I mean, whether you're in person or online, there is for sure an initiative that you have to take. You know, I mean, like, you can, if you want to, you can come in and sit in the back row here and never get involved in a group, never get involved in serving, and really just kind of live in the shadows of anonymity. And the same is true online. But I think when we can understand that we were created for that kind of community, that we are truly stronger and better and more close to God's design for us when we're in community, then that should spur us to take that step and say something in the chat, get connected to a Jennifer, to you, to a church community, because that's how we were designed.
Yeah, and that really leads us right into that next point you made about Satan wants to steal our praise, and we let him. I think not only was Satan wants to steal our praise a powerful point for us to realize, but it's even more powerful to know that we are the ones letting him do that. Just like going back 2 sentences ago, when we don't lean in worship, we're letting Satan steal our praise. We allow him to do that.
Yeah,
that was my favorite segment of yours.
Yeah,
I lied earlier when I said this was actually my favorite too.
Wait a minute.
It is. I say this all the time, and I think a lot of it because before I started doing this, I was leading worship for middle schoolers and high schoolers, and so in my leading of students, I would I don't want to say dumb it down, but I really wanted them to understand why, and so as I would lead, it was almost more teaching as leading, and that was something I always wanted to make, because we would take them to things like mix or CIY, and they'd have these big emotional, like you're feeling so much, and there's so much feelings involved in it, and making that point that if you're waiting to feel something in worship, then you very well could be waiting your entire life to then make it's not about feeling something, it's about responding to who God is in his presence, who is there and ready. And so if the reality is we let our preference, we let our insecurity, we let just our lack of desire to be uncomfortable, we let our own pride get in the way of making the decision to worship Jesus. And when we make the decision to not, that is Satan winning, without a doubt. I mean, that is what he wants us to feel unqualified. He wants us to feel unworthy. He wants us to sit there and say, I don't like this or that because it's not this way or that way. That's what he wants us to do. And so just like anything, we get the choice to make the decision whether we want to allow him to steal our praise there or whether we will praise anyways. And that is, I think for me, I don't know. I don't like to lose, and I'm stubborn in a lot of ways, and I can get hard-headed. And I think there are a lot of times that has motivated. There's been plenty of times where I'm like, I don't feel like doing this, or I don't want to do this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just not in the mood. I'm tired. I'm whatever. I don't want to do this. And as soon as I do that, I'm like, the thought comes in then basically, so you're going to let Satan win today. And then immediately it's kind of like well, I'm not going to lose, and not even that there's a little bit of like my own pridefulness that then comes in, but God can use our humanness and our weakness to then put us in the direction he wants, And so, I think we haven't reached that yet as a people. And I know, like Jon mentioned, and I don't know if we'll get to this, whatever. So hopefully I'm not jumping ahead, but that's what we were talking a little bit about, what has gone on at Asbury College. I mean, that is, there's a ton of different posts that float around, and everybody has to weigh in, and a lot of people have their own agendas, and, with what they say about that. The reality of it is, what has taken place there is because some students made the choice to praise. The building has nothing to do with it. The lack of this or that has nothing to do with it.
The background of those theological statements.
None of that has anything to I mean, just the reality of it is the Holy Spirit's not waiting around like, finally, a place that's not using a hazer. Now we can do something. You know what I mean? Like, no, he's waiting for some people to make the choice to praise. That's what he's waiting for. And some kids decided to do that.
And not stop.
And that is why what has happened.
Yeah.
And I think when we as Christians start realizing the power that our choice to make in that has, then that's going to change the game for not only your life, but our country, our world. And that's when the difference happens.
Yeah. And I loved that. I had such a big smile on my face when you went right into Lee's story. And again, if you want to hear her story, you can go to the Praise podcast right now and hear all 2 hours of it.
Yeah.
But I loved, and again, it's super neat that you use that story, because I felt that the way you felt that, even watching you on stage with Lee and knowing what you were going through at that point. At that same Friday night, she was going through with her mom. You were going through some house stuff. Nate was going through his adoption wilderness. Brooke going with adoption craziness. And I saw 4 people, maybe there was a 5th person in that picture that I took, but 5 people raising a hallelujah despite what they were going through and choosing not to let Satan win in their circumstance. And gosh, it was a powerful moment for you. I'm glad you shared that so other people can find some testimony in that, because like you said earlier, when we share our testimonies, that denies Satan what he wants.
Yeah, I think another way, Satan wins by us keeping our struggles and our issues, and even, I think it's really easy for us to be like, hey, and Jon talks about this, here's the victory that I've experienced in my life, or here's the miracle that God, but we don't always say like, here's the miracle I need to happen, or here's the struggle that I'm in, or here's the wilderness that I'm in right now. But yeah, Lee's story, man, if you've got some time, you just need to go listen to that. That was the most impactful conversation that that Brooke and I've had on podcast, and maybe that I've just had in general. Like as far as just, again, Lee's mom passed away recently. It was a year-long fight, and a lot of different ups and downs. And what I think is most powerful about, specifically her story, was they saw a lot of victory in that year. Yeah. And for the way that God moved so many times and removed so many barriers and blocks, and, there was healings and just all these things, you would not assume that the story ends a few months, with Lori passing away.
Yeah, this is what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, that's what we even talked about. I said, because in the reality of it, it's just, that's not how we would assume that story ends. But yeah, just to know, there's so many people that are walking through difficulties. And, I think that's one thing, I will probably get to it next week some, but, everybody, I think there's a little bit, because, Central is a fairly large church, and it's got a rich history of things. And, I think there's a little bit of, the people up on stage have all together, and they don't, it's like they don't have the same issues I have. And I mean, like,
it's a lie.
It's a lie. Like everybody up there, including myself, Jon, whoever, we're all just normal human beings trying to live this life. That is the same difficulty for, it's hard. And so, but there is a different level of accountability, and there's a different eye that gets put on that. And to know what each of them go through and then worship through each and every weekend is, like for me as their pastor, as a worship, like honestly, that's what fuels me most weekends, is knowing what they are each going through and pushing through and making the commitment, and they're not getting paid to do it. They're just showing up and giving up hours upon hours of their time here and at home. And so, but Lee's story and her mom's story is just, it's the best example that I know of how to celebrate victory, mourn in defeat with each other, but then also just celebrate that and make the choice that no matter what, no matter the outcome, like we're going, and it is her whole family, we're going to praise through it. We're going to worship through it.
And truthfully, I mean, as sad as the situation was, as up and down, and ultimately the disappointing for them, the way that situation ended, her life, I went to her funeral. Her life was celebrated in exactly that manner. You know, I mean, it wasn't like this deep grieving mourning. I mean, for sure they were sad that she died, but it was way more of a worship service as they celebrated her life than it was anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we transitioned into John's section of the sermon. And I liked how because you really dovetailed. I don't know if is that a word?
Yeah, it is as well used as well. Good job.
Why is that? I don't know why I used it.
So like they interlock, like a dovetail, like a dovetail.
Because like cabinetry.
Because like a dovetail drawer, you know, like.
But why is that called a dovetail?
I think it's because like the feathers of a dovetail kind of like.
Okay, people are screaming at their phones right now because they're listening and they know the answer and I didn't.
I've shot several doves before, and
I've never seen. But your first point was
that's the first thing I ever shot in my life was a dove. It was
Really?
on a.
you're not supposed to shoot those.
You're
are
not
you?
supposed to shoot doves, but when you're a little kid with a BB gun and there's a dove on the line.
would you shoot next an American eagle?
Yes.
Was that the part of the Nate thing too? Yeah, you got to see. Side note, you got to see that Nate Bargatkin because he has a whole thing about what to do if you harm a bald eagle.
Move.
But going back to the sermon, praise honors God, and that stuff really, when you go into the Lord's Prayer, that's the first thing that you do is you praise. Those first words that Jesus taught us to pray were to bring bring praise to our Father.
Well, I mean, I think it's just really interesting that in the model prayer that Jesus gave us, it starts off obviously giving God honor, but then it says, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," and we know that heaven is filled with God's praises, and so if His will is being done in heaven, which it is because it's heaven, and that includes praise of Him, then obviously His will would be for.
4 dings.
His will would be for earth to experience or to praise Him as well.
Yeah. And then I liked too, because you kind of bring in that praise invites God to the situation, whatever the circumstance. And I think that's what we talked about a little bit earlier. It's regardless of what your circumstance you're going through, you're going to praise through that.
I mean, I think that looking at it through the lens of no matter what the situation is, if I can find the strength to praise, if I can muster the strength in me to praise, even though I don't feel like it, we have a guarantee that there is the greatest strength is on its way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that brings us into your third one. Real praise promises His presence. And that's we're going back to the Asbury University. It is that revival starts when we're able to lay it out on the line and when His presence is there. And it's really neat. I think the Clockengays, Jon and Diana, went to Asbury. And
I know a number of people that have gone down. And
Jon was he said he couldn't put words to what he expressed going into that room and feeling God's presence. There was something different. And that's what happens when we are bringing our legitimate, genuine praise. And it's not just another show that we're there to be entertained by. It's not they played the right one, the songs that I liked, so then I'm going to give my perfect praise. No, it's real praise promises His presence. And it's that His presence is ushered in. And I love how, I forget what I was listening to on the radio the other day, but it was like, we can come into His presence, but we leave with His presence. It's when we come, it's not something we go into and come in and out of. It's something that can go out of with us. And that's what a worship lifestyle is all about. Yes, worship gatherings bring us into His presence, but we can take His presence with us throughout the rest of our day.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good. I look at those pictures from Asbury, and I can't help. I mean, you can't help but notice that in a lot of those pictures, it's not everybody is like ultra engaged. I mean, like sometimes there's people off to the side laughing. There's a person on their phone or whatever. But I think it is just this, and I don't quite know how to articulate this. I've not thought about it a lot, but I mean, the fervent praise of some impacts all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because even if you're not actively praising, you're impacted by the presence that the praise that's happening brings.
Yep.
That makes sense.
It makes sense. I wouldn't say it any differently.
Okay. Perfect.
And here's the cool. I love that you did ministry time at the end. And ministry time at Central is just our prayer time. And because that last point of the truest praise comes when we are still seeking the victory. And I think it was a Holy Spirit moment that's what God revealed to you in Scripture about Jericho and Joshua and the Israelites? Because I would have never thought about that too. I would have thought, okay, when they're marching around, they know what's going to happen. They know they're going to conquer this land.
Right.
But even if you go backwards, they thought this land was full of giants.
Right.
And so they not only did they not know what the outcome was, because maybe God didn't tell them what the outcome was going to be. They going into it thinking these are huge, insurmountable, giant struggles that we were not going to be overcome, or that we might be overcome by.
I just, and I like in a lot of things, I hadn't noticed it until you notice it, but like you read through Joshua 6 and it says God told Joshua, and then Joshua tells the people, here's what we're going to do. But at least not written out in Scripture does Joshua disseminate the victory plan. I mean, he just says, here's the marching orders, not so much here's the outcome. And so it was the people's responsibility to do what they were called to do, which was walk around the city, 6 days in a row, waking up. And, I mean, I'm positive that there were some people who experienced,
Oh gosh.
golly, why are we doing this? I mean, like it's been a minute. Here we are, day 6. Yep. Hey, it's still there. What do you know? Good job, Joshua. Well, I mean, like, I think there were plenty of people who didn't understand what was going to happen on the 7th day. But the truest praise happens while you're still walking the wall, while you're still yet to see the victory.
Yeah. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. And I liked that John 5:17. Can you read that for us? Do you have that in front of you?
Yeah, my Father's always working, and so am I. That's what Jesus said.
Yeah, I love that. I told you that when we were going through the sermon, I never heard, like that never popped off the page for me. And so it was really neat to know that God is working in our praise to our victory. And we get the chance to be a part of that. And not only, he's always working. Even if we don't feel like we're bringing our best in the praise, we need to still be willing to go in it.
For sure.
So it's really good. I just really appreciate you. It's just neat to know, Jon, your history of worship pastoring, and now being a great leader for us and a great preacher. And Eric, I mean, gosh, good job. I mean,
so good,
another
right?
preacher.
I mean,
we got
golly,
these worship pastors just think they can do it all.
Well, I mean, Eric is a communicator. I mean, he's more than I don't want to say just a worship leader, but I mean, he's much more. I mean, he's a leader and a communicator. And so great job, Eric. Well done.
Thank you very much. It was I told Jon I very much appreciated only have to doing a segment of a sermon instead of the full thing, Yeah. But no, it's I don't know, there's just a lot, there's a lot that I have, people have poured into me and have taught me, and I've had a lot of great mentors that have gotten me to this point, Jon being one of those that I've gotten to learn from and witness and watch and worship under. And so it's.
Are you contractually required to mention Jeremy Redmond here?
Yeah, I mean, like, Jeremy gets
almost out of time, and we have not mentioned him.
Yeah, no, Jeremy gets a lot of plug on the Praise podcast, so he knows. I actually,
and rightfully so.
Yeah, him and I FaceTimed the other night because he knew that it's going on, and so I was sending him some of my notes, and we were talking through some stuff on different things, but yeah, it's really neat to get the chance to kind of communicate worship in a different way, to talk about it, because it really is a lifestyle, and it really is, it's just so much more than a Friday night or a Sunday morning, and I think the more and more I'm really passionate about people understanding that, because when we understand that, then I think we can really, it just opens doors to a whole different way that Jesus can work, and God can work, through you and your life and with other people.
And that's the last thing I wanted to say, is just knowing that this is a year that we're asking God and building up, knowing your history, Eric, and knowing where you've come and where you're at now and how God has led you into that. It's just, it makes that building up thought even more purposeful and powerful in my mind, and hopefully it can in people's too. So we're going to change gears just a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit more about Eric Lyday. We said last episode that we were starting something brand new, what we're calling Rapid Fire. And Eric Lyday, you're going to be a part of Rapid Fire.
Okay.
So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back. We're going to talk to Eric Lyday, and we're going to ask him the big questions that people want to know. Are you ready?
So ready.
And we're back with the Central Weekly for Eric Lyday and Rapid Fire. He had to go to the bathroom because it was just so much.
Yeah, too much.
Too much.
Too much pressure.
Are you ready for Rapid Fire? Mm-hmm. Okay, first question. You're getting whatever comes to mind. Favorite food?
Favorite food, probably burger.
Favorite vacation spot?
The beach.
You have
Actually, I'm going to take that back. I'm going to go to the mountains.
Oh, the complete opposite. Wow. You have a day to yourself. What do you do?
I probably go play golf, and I eat some really good food, and I binge a TV show on probably Netflix.
And person in the Bible you identify with most?
Who did I just had this conversation with somebody?
Yeah,
you were a part of that. Who did I say?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember.
David.
Was it? No, I didn't say David. That was cliche. No, I think probably
Ruth.
Paul. Yeah, Ruth. Identify most with Ruth.
Done.
I think it was Paul.
Yeah.
Paul really sticks out to me in the Bible.
Favorite thing about Central?
My favorite thing about Central is that has been, I would give this answer many different ways over the years. Right now, my favorite thing about Central is besides working here, is the way that it has impacted my family, specifically my kids.
Speaking of kids, favorite dad moment?
Favorite dad moment is watching your kids like do something they love to do is really fun.
And finally, biggest fear?
Biggest fear is right now I've actually had this nightmare two nights in a row, which I'm hoping that I don't have prophetic dreams, but it's been falling out of a lift, and so now
You've been
currently
on a lift a lot.
I've been on a lift a lot this last week, and I've had a few nightmares of I've taken the wrong step, and so right now I'd say my biggest fear is falling out of a lift.
And I've been on a lift with you recently.
Yeah, I know.
too.
Well, now you know. Now you know if I'm a little hesitant, I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm dreaming about here. So
Okay, so we're not going to take a break. We're going right into our final question. Eric Lyday, how has God been working in your life lately?
God has been working in my life in a lot of different ways. He has been teaching me more and more, I think, through how he is a dad to me, and the patience and the love and the time that he gives me. He's helping me do that better with my own kids.
Yeah.
And be the type of dad that he is for me to be for them, and to set that example. He has taught me a lot about I think really, 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 like it's easy to preach about going to him with everything and to make him a part of everything. It's another thing to actually do that. And not to plug Praise Podcast again, but I don't even know
What
when this came
podcast?
up, but but our actual
flagship.
Yeah, the next episode that we'll release, which it won't be out yet, but the last episode Brooke and I recorded, type of like, I don't think that you alluded to house stuff, whatever it is, and I don't feel like God has necessarily like I'm living out punishment for a decision I made, but like learning that. Things I think can be different, and they certainly will be so much better that if you trust his timing, his plans, and you go to him before you make decisions about things. And so my wife and I have been learning a lot about that recently. And I could go on for a long time with the things he teaches me, and also just I think and within our creative arts team, we've been talking I feel like for so long here at Central, we've been talking about, transition this, transition that, like it's just, cause it is a big deal, and it, like some transitions fold churches, like it is a big deal. And, praise the Lord, so far that has not been the case here at Central, and it's been, but it's been another step in the right direction for this church, that has already done so much, and been blessed so many ways. But, as we were talking, like I think for him he's been teaching me like, okay, the transition stuff is kind of done now. Like it's time to, I have clearly put you in this, you know what I mean? Like you're here only because I've put you here. So now I need you to lead and do the things that I've put you here to do, because that's why I've put you in this spot to do it. And so, I think just coming into that role more and, understanding that more has been, so sorry, that's not one thing, but that covers personal, family, and work. So there you go. That's what I'm learning.
Good job, Eric Lyday.
Thanks.
Well, now here's the point of the episode where Jon and I say, "What he did a great job. Eric Lyday did a great job." Usually they're not in the room when we do it.
Yeah.
I just love that Eric Lyday. He did a great job.
Guy.
Oh man.
What would be fun? What would be fun is we need to, because Brooke's going to be pregnant, and she's going to be gone, and we've tried to store up a bunch of episodes and
running out,
but this baby won't come,
running dry,
and so like all of our stockpile is running out because we thought we were way ahead of the game. But when she's gone, we should reverse it, and then you guys can come on Praise Podcast
crossover,
and then I will drive, but you guys will need to clear some time in your schedule.
Yeah, we're gonna be done in under an hour. Yeah. That's how you do these.
Yeah, we're just Brooke and I are usually just getting warmed up. So
you're still going through your first segment.
Yeah,
you're still asking them to tell you how good you are on your comments. We don't bring that up. We're confident.
Yeah, no, you guys are missing out on that. You need to.
We don't have anybody to add to
if they won't tell you, you guys need to leave ratings and reviews. You need to do that. That's important.
See, this Mr. Eric Lyday, so good.
I mean,
well, Eric, you're not going anywhere. Well, you're not. You're going to go somewhere, but you'll be back. Episode number 52 next week. We're going to continue to look at the praise we sing, and we're going to look at again. Week 2 is what?
Yeah, the songs we sing, and then next week we're going to talk about. Sorry,
did I say that? I'll review.
And next week we're going to talk about give to praise.
Yes, and we can't wait for you to be a part of that. And that's it for the Central Weekly. I'm so good at these transitions. Bye, everybody. See you later. Music out.